welcome to this week's episode of The Safety Brief. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and today we're talking about undetected breaches. You might think you'd know if your network was compromised, but what if I told you an average attacker stays hidden inside a business for over 200 days before anyone even notices? Today we have Mike and Matt to help us unpack why that happens, what can go wrong, and why relying on detection alone just doesn't cut it anymore. So let's dive right in. Let's start with the basics here. When we talk about attackers hiding out in a network for over 200 days, what does that really look like in a real world scenario?
Yeah, Elizabeth, it's a good question, and it sounds like a crazy statistic, but more often than not, people, think of they try to think of cyber attacks or cyber infiltration the same way as like a maybe a physical break-in or a break-in and entering, like in a home or a business or even a car, right? Like they see the difficult thing with a physical break-in is you see the kinetic effects of the break-in at the time of the break-in. So it's very obvious, right? There's evidence, there's broken glass, there's a car alarm, there's even bent window panes. Maybe somebody tried to get into a certain vehicle or a certain home, but something tripped it. But again, with cyber attacks, it's very, very different as far as a timeline perspective. It is often, it's almost as if a threat actor is metaphorically walking up to a window and just nudging it like an inch each night or each day, right? It's very, very subtle. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint to a lot of these threat actors. And while certainly, data exfiltration and ransomware and more, things that get more airtime on the news certainly seem like huge impacts, they are often preceded by, exactly as you'd already mentioned, an immense amount of measuring, time, research, execution, and planning. Now, does every cyber attack take 200 days from the point of initial access to kinetic impact? No, certainly not.
No.
But the point is that we can't think of cyber attacks or cyber incidents in the same way that we do physically or empirically, that we, try and rectify that, hey, are the windows locked or the doors locked? Is the door closed, right? It's very, very different in a way of, there's a lot of information that a threat actor would get if they're able to inch their way towards their target than if they tried to, throw a rock through a metaphorical window and right now they're subject to being found out. So yeah, the timeline's very different for sure.
Yeah, I like the way that you explain that because most do see it like that, even on movies and TV shows. It's always bam right in your face, right away, and that's definitely not the case.
Right.
Even with detection in the background, it's still going unnoticed.
Just
Matt,
plug in the
anything?
USB and you have access, right?
You're
It's like, yeah,
if only it was that easy.
right. Yeah. A little different.
The reason they remain undetected is because they're using inferior technology or have inferior analysts. I mean, that if we want to look at it both ways. But there is EDR will not pick up a lot of the threats that they use. And a lot of cases when they're in the environment, there's nothing to detect. There's no program that's been dropped. There's nothing. Your stuff has been sold on the black market, also known as dark web, and they're using legitimate logins because you have something that's open to the world, allowing them to access it. And that's a very common thing to see.
Yeah.
They space out everything that they're doing, makes it look like a legitimate user. And then once they have done all the reconnaissance that they need, well, then they launch their attack. By that time, you're already screwed. So, I mean, there is no saving it at that point. When somebody's been in an environment for months, they already know what your capabilities are, and they know that obviously you have no response. So it's kind of easy for them to do whatever they want to do and just walk away with it.
I think that
Especially,
also highlights the fact that we are always touting vulnerability scans, knowing where you're vulnerable, knowing where those access points are. So I'm glad you brought that up, Matt. So I'd also like to unpack this a little bit more by providing what tactics these attackers are using to stay undetected. for so long? Are these common gaps, blind spots? What makes it easier for them to hide for such a long time instead of setting off those alarms? Matt, you kind of brought that up a little bit. If you want to go a little bit deeper into that.
I mean, honestly, allowing them to hide or being able to hide is just a matter of being able to do things that your security solution is not going to pick up on. Now, most people are leveraging, EDR, and we still see where everybody thinks that EDR is the second and third coming of, the cyber deity, and doesn't work. Flat out doesn't work. Almost all EDRs that you're looking at out there run on predetermined hash values or rules that they have built. They're hyper generalized. They can't make them extremely strict because they can't risk impacting customers because they're sending this out to a wide variety of users. So they have to be hyper generalized. When you run something like that and you're not able to customize, tweak, build, do whatever you need, you're not going to pick up on a lot of the tactics that are being leveraged. And that's, one of the terrible things. And I will say, we've seen this before. Your EDR probably isn't going to pick up on a multi-phase payload. I'll give you an example. There's a very well-known EDR that claims that they are absolutely unbeatable. Amazing technology. So unbeatable, in fact, that all it took was downloading a payload that I built to a machine, which it did not pick up the payload because it was a very, very simple script file. The script file pulled down another payload and then moved that payload the second that it hit the endpoint to a different location. I was given notification, hey, you need to check this location and delete any files that are residing here. That's cute. By the time you sent the notification for that to happen, it had already been moved and it had already been detonated from a different location, and it was overlooked completely. So it didn't help, because if you go in there and you look, there's no files. They're going to say, oh, well, this was just, false alarm, nothing here to work with. When in fact, it was just moved somewhere else that it wasn't looking for and had opened up a beacon that allowed complete and utter remote access to the machine.
Yeah, I mean, super well said as far as, Matt's perspective. And it's important to notice, that there's a lot of faith put on tools that are touted as set and forget. And then, we travel often, we speak at events often, and we have seen a lot of, I'll just say this. We've talked with a lot of providers that had a lot of faith in tools that touted themselves as set and forget, or tools that offered premium support, or even tools that offered their own SOC, right? Like the same software developer that makes the tool is offering SOC, metaphorically speaking. And they are reeling after an event. They're asking questions, they're wondering, and they didn't have internal eyes on glass monitoring the events. And we've also seen instances where the tool is even prevented in a self-managed capacity, right? They're not using what we offer. They weren't partners of ours, but they're leveraging a tool that they're managing themselves, but the tool was preventing, encryption events and preventing lateral movement and preventing this for upwards of 5 to 8 days, calendar days. Now, you give any threat actor unlimited time, they're going to innovate their way around almost anything, right? Almost anything, right? It's almost as if, metaphorically, we'll go back to the house analogy. If you leave town, right, you go on vacation and you're not at your home, if a burglar's trying to get in your house, time's on their side, right? Time's on their side. So they can take time to plan and scope and case and see, and, they have time on their side. If they know that, hey, mom or dad just went down the street to pick up their kid from the bus stop, I got 120 seconds. The mom and dad may come back to like a TV ripped off the wall, but they didn't make it out with the TV, or the safe was pulled out, but not open, right? They had to act very quickly, and maybe they weren't able to get what they wanted. With cybercrime, and specifically cyber breaches, if the tools are not 24/7 monitored, just like you are in your home. If you're not home 24/7 and your house is broken into and you don't have both tools and monitoring 24/7, you're going to find out that there was a breach when you get home, not when it happens. And the same stuff happens with cyber incidents, right? We see all these, I had these tools deployed and this, that, and they advertise it as set and forget. And it's, again, you got to think of it like physical security in some ways, that the analogy stands that if you're not physically home, if you don't have complete visibility to whatever that is, that the entity that you're trying to secure and protect, you don't have confidence that it's secure. You don't. You're alluding to a really a risk metric of, hey, I'm more confident than I was. Certainly. Yep, absolutely. Without any tool deployed. But again, threat actors have a lot of runway to innovate around tools. And if they know that, hey, I still have this port open, I still have this process running, that hasn't been cut off yet. They know that. They know if they're in there for an hour, a day, a week, they're probably not, if they haven't been caught in a week or a month and they keep doing the same stuff, and as long as they don't change their script too much, they're not going to get detected, right? And until they escalate privilege, and really that's where the kinetic impact goes in the form of, DC is owned or a file server is owned or data exfiltrated. And so again, how do these threat actors stay undetected for so long is because they're incredibly patient, and it takes a certain level of monitoring, right? And it's, again, this isn't EDR versus monitored EDR, right? There's a lot of marketable terms in our space right now. MDR is widely overused. I heard a new term I'd never heard before, an XSP. It's like a cross services MSP that does more, right? There's so many terms that the marketing has flooded this industry with. It's tough to understand who means what by what they say. But here's the reality, just to boil it down as simple as possible, that if you don't have complete visibility, if something isn't being watched 24/7, 365, your confidence in how secure that thing is, you have to concede and say it's less than maybe I would like to admit. And so, yes, did I put a lock on my door when I left my house? Yes. Are you at your house? No. Do you have cameras at your house? No. Is anybody at your house watching it for you? No. Then you don't have confidence. You can't physically have confidence that that is secure. It's in the same state you left it until you get home. And so is the same with cybersecurity. And so, again, are there tools? Are there precautions? Are there preventative mechanisms? Yes, absolutely. But again, how long you're away from home, how long it's been since there's been eyes on glass in a certain environment. And this is why we really work with so many, almost countless MSPs now up in the United States specifically, because they physically don't have the manpower to 24/7, 365 babysit and watch each house that they've been entrusted with. And that's okay. Their job isn't to watch and monitor 24/7. Their job is to make sure that it's in good working order, right? Like that's their job, is reliability and uptime. But security is a whole nother bear. And a lot of partners come to us and say, hey, I might have been overly ambitious and now my client is suffering, or, hey, I want to get on the front of this. I don't want to ever have to deal with this. I want to package this in my model. And thus Blockworks has a really elegant way of modeling or kind of aligning with that type of model with MSPs. So again, a little bit longer answer, but specifically how do threat actors stay undetected for so long is because 24/7, 365 really has to mean eyes on glass. It doesn't mean the tool is always running, right? If I lock my door at night, it's going to stay locked, obviously, right? Like unless somebody goes up and unlocks it, it's going to stay locked, but locks are able to be gotten through. And so it is true with cybersecurity, unless you're there standing watch.
That was very well put, Mike. Thank you so much for that. So I have a sticker that I really like, and it says "Think like a hacker," and I think this is actually a sticker that you got me at one of the events, Mike. Absolutely love it. And so that's kind of how this question is going to be. While the attackers are in there that long or having access for that long, what exactly are they doing during that time? Let's kind of break down what the hacker is doing. Are they pulling up a chair and watching everything you're doing, messing with you? Just kind of a fun twist. And again, how much damage can really be done as well.
Yeah, this is not my 100. I don't live in this seat 365 days like Matt does, right? He gets to play with the uranium in the lab and the test range, and I get to walk on and maybe do this 2 weeks a year. But specifically, to your point, they're casing the environment. They'll get enough access to be able to monitor, to gather more intel, to make a more surgical or a more subtle attack. And again, is initial access kinetic? Yes, but there are repercussions. There are end goals of, like Matt even said it already. There's data access brokers where once they find that back door, they get a C2 beacon up. They're just going to, hey, I got in. Here's the keys. You go rob the house. All I did was just confirm that every Thursday they leave the back screen sliding door open because they have a barbecue the night before or whatever, right? Like that is what data access brokers do. They find the hole, they validate that it's legitimate, they post it for sale, and they sell it off to someone who's got the the guts to go and walk through the door and carry out an attack. And again, so it's not always the same entity. It's not always the same person doing this, but more often than not, while undetected, while dormant, right, to a lot of security monitoring, they're sitting there gathering information, just poking and seeing, hey, this door is unlocked. Okay, I'm gonna wait until I check something until the next day. All right, that door is unlocked, and again, they're incredibly patient.
Matt, anything further on that? I know that's your
They in your stuff.
field.
They are they are working as hard as they can to basically just enumerate the environment. They want to know what they're looking at. They want to know what is available. It all comes down to what value are they going to get from this information and how valuable is what they have access to the company. There are some cases where they will sit in there and they will find that the company is basically just useless to them because there is not really any data that is of monetary value that anybody would want to pay to get back. No personally identifiable information, no information that would be, medical, legal, or anything like that would really drive up the price. Some people they'll pay no matter what because they're terrified, and they'll feed off of that. But the entire time that they are sitting in that environment is because they were given access to a specific point. They have to earn access to the rest of that network.
Yeah.
And that's either by doing lateral movement or that's by doing privilege escalation. They may get lucky and they may be sold an account that has crazy administration access because somebody decided to not change a password or somebody reuses their password everywhere. It's very common. Looking at you, Oracle. That's what happens. I mean, they're spending their time to understand the environment. They are basically doing the equivalence of dating your data at that time. They're taking it out to nice restaurants. They're getting it to basically tell it all about themselves. Once they have that information, or once they think that somebody is catching on that they might be in the environment, that's when you're going to notice activity ramps up, data starts leaving your environment, and you get that lovely, it's not you, it's me. Give me all your money message that pops up on the lovely desktop. And as much as I would love to say that, there is no defense for this, there is a defense for it. We've proven time after time there is a defense for it. But I've also seen, as of recently, countless people are finally making the admission that smaller organizations do not know security. And this is a big thing. If you have somebody that is sitting in your environment and you don't know security, how are you going to even know they are there? And that's how a lot of these companies are getting popped, is because they just don't know that somebody's in their environment. They have the tools, but the tools don't help them because you have to know how to use the tools. It's like setting yourself up at a racetrack, having the fastest car known to man, but you happen to be Gen Alpha and you don't know how to drive a 6-speed. It is not going anywhere if you do not understand the mechanics behind how to make the clutch disengage and the accelerator engage. It's going to sound really cool. It's going to look really cool. It is not going to go anywhere. So You need to have that capability, that understanding, just to make sure that your environment is at least having somebody's watchful eye over top of it.
Yeah.
Because as you said, you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know they're there, you can't defend against it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And if you're one of the few who cannot drive a stick shift or 6 speed, I am with you. I've tried, I have stalled, almost crashed. It's okay. But you wouldn't go out and buy one without knowing how
Right.
to use it. So I love that analogy.
Right.
And I think it's time to switch the conversation a little bit and start to talk about strategy. Why do so many businesses still rely heavily on detection as their first line of defense? And why is that approach just not enough anymore?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, putting ourselves in the seats of those decision makers, again, we think of it in a home of residence type model, that if I know someone's at my door, then I can stop it. That it's that easy, right? To a certain degree. Or if my front door is locked, someone would be deterred from going any further. And it's often much more simple than that. It's, you give your kid a house key, they go to school, they lose their keys on the way to school, or just hand them to someone that says, "Hey, I'm your teacher, can I have your keys?" And they hand the keys over to this individual, and then you go on vacation, metaphorically speaking, because you're not monitoring the environment as much as you think maybe you are or can at scale. And so, the difficulty with detection is, it's one thing to be 1,000 miles away watching your house get broken into without the ability to action or do anything about it, right? And that is what we've seen as a very real picture of a lot of service providers and IT teams, that they have these tools to let them know what and when something is happening. But these tools themselves, or these services, are not nearly as actionable as they tout themselves to be. And so what does that look like? Hey, people are sleeping. Hey, I just wanted to email you that somebody is trying to break into your house or broken into your house at 3 a.m. and you should do something about it, right? No, like there
That's
are
literally it.
authorities,
Yeah.
right? Like that's what most of our partners are used to getting as far as emails. They'll monitor on the event, they'll pick up on the event, they'll notify the partner, and they'll say, "Here's what I recommend you do." But the reality is that, are they the appropriate authority to be responding to this event? No. You call the cops, you call the fire department, you call the people trained that do this 24/7, 365, respond to these things because they know about continuum of force and all of these things that go into their professional training. Cybersecurity is that. You need professionally trained responders to understand, number one, what kind of situation is in front of them. Just assessing the situation it's something that very seldom people think about. But again, what does Paul Blart Mall Cop do? They observe and report. Observe and report, right? That is detection-based security. It's, hey, we saw this happen because we have good monitoring out there. We're detecting on it, and we're letting you know. You'll never see a mall cop chase anything down, right? That's not their job. That is unarmed security. That is not in their scope of work. They are observe and report. I know this. I've done this.
The new
It's not on a segue,
meme.
but I've done this, right? And so the whole point is, from observe and report, is to notify the proper authorities. With cybersecurity, we don't have time like that on our side. And so the moment that often a lot of legacy or a lot of current solutions are detecting on something, it's often too late in the kill chain, right? It's very much downstream. It's very much like the train has left the station. It's not even just left the station, right? It's arriving at the station and they just see the train distance. They're like, "Oh, hey, this is happening." Right? It's just late in the kill chain. And so when we talk about left of boom versus right of boom, and don't get me wrong, there is a place and a time and a need for forensic investigators and individuals that are professionally trained with rebuilding environments after a breach. But our claim, and it's true, is that there is far more that is preventable than is getting prevented. And it's far easier than most people think when you have the right, again, time, team, and tools deployed in a really cohesive fashion. And so, yeah, that's detection only just doesn't do it, right? You have to be able to do something about it right then, right there. And that's why it's difficult. when we see partners go and purchase something or procure something from a vendor that they meet at an event, or a solution or a tool that, they have set and they don't look at anymore. That's difficult. That's difficult.
Love the mall cop analogy. I
That's
foresee
real.
a new meme hitting the social platforms
Yeah, man.
shortly.
The person on the
So
Segway is not going to save you, right? They can
yeah.
notify the authorities, most definitely, right? That Segway is to get to the authorities, right? It's not to respond to the threat. And
They're not
so,
going to call you though. It's just going to be an email.
yeah.
Matt, anything from you on that one? No, already. Well, to close us off, for someone listening right now, thinking, okay, maybe we're being too reactive and we want to switch and start to be more proactive. What should be their first move to move towards a proactive prevention focused strategy?
Yeah, it's a good question. Often where most of the people that we come into contact with, where they start out is skeptical that incidents are preventable in the way that we claim them to be, and we totally get that. Based on their experience, based on their time on water, I would have the same perspective, but we see a lot that a lot of people don't see, and both experientially and forensically, as far as the tool set and stack that we've kind of curated over time. And so what we'd have most people do is they do a test drive for up to 2 weeks. We deploy cloud and email security. We deploy endpoint security, more host-based protection. And, again, we run it in tandem with whatever email filtering and whatever endpoint security they already have deployed. And I would say probably 7 out of 10 get a robust volume of events that they had no clue were present, and that they maybe knew the applications were there and installed, like bloatware or riskware or whatever, but they hadn't had a tool that would detect on those things in the past, and they're very surprised by that. And so again, the most risk-free, commitment-free way is take it out for a test drive. Contact us, get in contact with us, either sales@hello@blockworks blockworks.com. And yeah, just sign up for a test drive. Proof of value is kind of the technical term for it, but that's where we see most partners kind of, again, it's a no commitment, nothing that's signed. There's no ink, there's no paper, there's no commitment. It's, enough to think that, hey, is prevention possible? Yes. And what is that first tenet? That complete visibility piece. And we often are able to pick up and find things that haven't been found before. And then we go through the whole blueprint of prevention and roll it out. And so, yeah, that's where I would say most commonly people start. And again, if you're listening to this, or if you're watching us and you're just tuning in, right, if it's like, this is a very idealistic approach to security, I wish that everything was preventable, and we get it, right? We 100% get it. We've seen it. We've heard it. We have a lot of partners that were in the same exact place. But again, it's one of those things. Once you experience it, there's quality of sleep at night that's really unprecedented, and allows you to scale ultimately way faster.
Yeah, thank you for that. Matt, anything for you before we close off for today?
Have conversations. Whoever you're going to use, have conversations. Ask them questions that are going to make them uncomfortable. If they can't answer them, then you don't need to work with them. If they're going to make up something and try to pass it off like they have a clue, and you obviously know that they are stretching and reaching, don't work with them. This is an area that you don't need somebody who's going to try to make up stuff. This is an area where you need somebody that's going to understand what exactly their limitations are and is going to be honest with you about that. I have been on with too many vendors that I have asked them very pointed questions about what their product capabilities are, and they have come back and told me that, oh yes, we use the most advanced forms of artificial intelligence that you could ask for in our product. Okay, well, what are you using? Oh, well, we've built machine learning buckets. Okay, well, that right there that means you have no idea about AI. I'm sorry, but machine learning is not advanced. You're basically using something dumber than a large language model. I mean, know what your capabilities are. Know who you're talking to. Ask those questions. If you ask them, what are your capabilities against X ransomware group? They should be able to answer that, because they should be doing efficacy on their own product. to know if it's going to be able to prevent things. If it's an EDR vendor, ask them about different TTPs that are being used and what their capabilities are to detect them and respond to them. Do they have any kind of automatic remediation that's been built in? These are questions that you need to know, because if you're going to take somebody's product and you're going to put it in your environment, you're now reliant on their capabilities to try and keep your livelihood safe and your employees' livelihood safe. So you've got to ask those uncomfortable questions. The best question to ask is, do you have any documentation showing any sort of testing done by an independent third-party company of your product? I will be very honest with you, none of them have it, because they are all too terrified to let somebody actually go to town on the product, and they will find all the shortcomings, which means they will then have to actually fix them because they are documented. It's easier to have something out there that partially works and is profitable than spend the time going through a quality software development lifecycle to release a fully baked product. So ask the uncomfortable questions. Your data is important. You know it. Obviously, the people who want it know it. So take the time. Going back to the car thing, you have somebody that's getting ready to start driving. Are you going to go out and, buy them a Lamborghini, or are you going to buy them a mid-90s beige Volvo, the equivalence of a Nokia phone? I'll tell you which one I'm going to do. It's going to be a beige Volvo that I could drive into any object out there on the road, and the thing is just going to bounce off it and laugh.
You don't want the Nokia?
That is the Nokia. The beige Volvo, that look the brick-looking Volvo from the 90s is unkillable.
Impenetrable.
They are.
Yeah.
You get something like that, you're going to be safe. That's what you're looking for. You want to find a company that is the equivalence of the boring beige Volvo. They know what they're good at. They do what they're good at. And they aren't going to make up a bunch of junk to try and sound like, they're just way better than what they are.
That's a great answer, and that's something that we tout on a lot on the safety brief, is not being afraid to ask those questions to an MSSP or even an MSP if you are another step. But yeah, that's an important aspect. So thank you for that, Matt. Well, that is all the time we have for today. And this conversation is exactly why prevention first security isn't just a buzzword. It's the difference between staying secure and becoming tomorrow's breach headline. Thank you so much to Mike and Matt for being here and sharing insights, as always. And if you want to learn more about prevention-driven cybersecurity, check out blockworks.com or reach out to us directly in the comments. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and don't just wait for the alert. Stop the threat before it starts. See you next time on the Safety Brief.
Thanks all.